Question 1. System analysis indicates that Balfour Beatty is facing a critical implementation challenge on a major infrastructure project where initial site surveys have revealed unforeseen ground conditions that significantly impact the planned construction methodology and pose potential health and safety risks. The project is operating under a tight deadline, and the client is pressuring for the original schedule to be maintained. What is the most appropriate course of action for Balfour Beatty to manage this situation in accordance with UK regulatory frameworks and professional ethical standards? Option A. Immediately halt all work in the affected areas, conduct a detailed risk assessment, and engage with the client to propose a revised project plan that incorporates necessary safety measures and adjusted timelines. Option B. Inform the client that the project is significantly delayed due to the unforeseen conditions and request a substantial extension without providing a detailed plan for remediation or risk mitigation. Option C. Proceed with the original construction plan, instructing site teams to implement minor ad hoc safety adjustments as needed to mitigate immediate risks, while continuing to push for the original completion date. Option D. Implement a new, untested safety protocol developed internally by Balfour Beatty's site management team to address the ground conditions, without prior consultation with the client or regulatory bodies. Correct answer is A. Immediately halt all work in the affected areas, conduct a detailed risk assessment, and engage with the client to propose a revised project plan that incorporates necessary safety measures and adjusted timelines. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between achieving project timelines and ensuring adherence to stringent regulatory requirements, specifically those governing health and safety in construction as mandated by UK legislation and industry best practices. Balfour Beatty, as a major contractor, has a legal and ethical obligation to prioritize the safety of its workforce and the public, even when faced with commercial pressures. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands without compromising safety standards. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent communication strategy with the client and relevant stakeholders, coupled with a thorough risk assessment and the development of a revised, compliant project plan. This demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and responsible project management. Specifically, it aligns with the Construction, Design and Management Regulations 2015 (CDM) regulations, which place duties on all parties involved in a construction project to manage health and safety risks. By engaging the client early and proposing solutions that maintain safety standards, Balfour Beatty upholds its legal obligations and ethical responsibilities, fostering trust and ensuring the long-term viability of the project. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over safety would be to proceed with the original schedule without adequately addressing the identified safety concerns. This directly contravenes the CDM regulations, which require that risks are identified, assessed, and controlled. Such an approach could lead to accidents, injuries, and significant legal repercussions, including fines and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, that of unilaterally altering safety procedures without client consultation, risks contractual breaches and can undermine collaborative project management, potentially leading to disputes and project delays anyway, albeit through a different mechanism. A third incorrect approach, that of downplaying the severity of the safety issues to the client, is ethically unsound and constitutes a failure of professional duty, potentially leading to a catastrophic incident and severe legal consequences. Professionals in such situations should employ a structured decision-making framework. This involves 1. Clearly identifying the regulatory and ethical obligations. 2. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment of the situation. 3. Exploring all feasible options that maintain compliance and safety. 4. Communicating transparently and proactively with all relevant parties, including the client, to negotiate solutions. 5. Documenting all decisions and communications thoroughly. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with professional standards and legal requirements. Question 2. The investigation demonstrates that a near-miss incident occurred on a Balfour Beatty construction site due to a failure in following established safety protocols for equipment operation. The site manager, under pressure to meet project deadlines, has suggested that the incident report be filed away without further action, citing the lack of any actual harm. What is the most appropriate course of action for Balfour Beatty to take in response to this situation? Adhering strictly to UK regulatory frameworks and best practice for health and safety management. Option A. Conduct a thorough review of the incident report by qualified health and safety personnel to identify root causes and implement necessary corrective actions, regardless of whether harm occurred. Option B. Immediately suspend the equipment operator involved without a formal investigation, based on the near-miss report alone. Option C. Accept the site manager's recommendation to file the report without further action, as no injuries or significant damage resulted from the near-miss. Option D. Implement minor, cosmetic changes to the safety signage on site to give the appearance of addressing the issue, while prioritizing project timelines. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough review of the incident report by qualified health and safety personnel to identify root causes and implement necessary corrective actions, regardless of whether harm occurred. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Balfour Beatty, as a large infrastructure group, operates within a highly regulated environment where adherence to specific legal and ethical standards is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient project delivery with the absolute requirement to comply with the UK regulatory framework, specifically concerning health and safety legislation and the company's own internal policies. Misinterpreting or disregarding these requirements can lead to severe consequences, including legal penalties, reputational damage, and most importantly, harm to individuals. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all actions taken are not only commercially sound, but also legally defensible and ethically responsible. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the incident report by Balfour Beatty's designated health and safety officers, who are equipped to interpret the findings against the backdrop of relevant UK legislation, such as the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 1974, and associated regulations like the Construction, Design and Management, Regulations 2015. This approach is correct because it ensures that the investigation's findings are assessed by individuals with the expertise to determine compliance or noncompliance with legal duties. It prioritizes a systematic, evidence-based review that leads to appropriate remedial actions, including potential disciplinary measures or procedural changes, thereby upholding Balfour Beatty's commitment to a safe working environment and legal compliance. An incorrect approach of immediately dismissing the report without a formal review by qualified personnel is professionally unacceptable. This failure bypasses the established legal and internal procedures for incident investigation and remediation. It demonstrates a disregard for the potential severity of the findings and a lack of commitment to the health and safety of Balfour Beatty's workforce and the public. Such an action could be construed as a breach of duty of care under UK law and a violation of the company's own safety policies, potentially leading to further incidents and significant legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach of implementing superficial changes without a root cause analysis is also professionally flawed. While it might appear to address the issue, it fails to identify the underlying systemic problems that contributed to the incident. This superficiality can lead to recurring issues, as the fundamental causes remain unaddressed. From a regulatory perspective, it suggests a lack of due diligence in preventing future harm, which is a key requirement under health and safety legislation. It also undermines the integrity of Balfour Beatty's safety management system. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Acknowledge and document the incident. 2. Initiate a formal investigation process, ensuring it is thorough and objective. 3. Engage relevant subject matter experts, including health and safety professionals, to review findings against legal and policy requirements. 4. Conduct a root cause analysis to understand the underlying factors. 5. Develop and implement appropriate corrective and preventative actions. 6. Monitor the effectiveness of these actions. 7. Communicate findings and actions to relevant stakeholders. This framework ensures that Balfour Beatty not only responds to incidents but actively learns from them to improve safety performance and maintain legal and ethical compliance. Question 3. The analysis reveals that Balfour Beatty is facing a significant challenge in adapting its operational procedures to comply with recently introduced stringent health and safety legislation specific to the UK construction industry. Which of the following approaches best ensures Balfour Beatty's compliance and upholds its duty of care to its workforce and the public? Option A. Prioritize project delivery timelines and address any potential health and safety compliance issues only if they arise during site inspections, rather than proactively updating procedures. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the new health and safety legislation, update Balfour-Beatty's internal policies and procedures accordingly, and implement comprehensive training programs for all affected employees, alongside robust monitoring systems. Option C. Implement a superficial training session on the new health and safety regulations without revising existing operational policies or establishing new monitoring mechanisms. Option D. Issue a company-wide memo acknowledging the new health and safety legislation and instruct all site managers to ensure their teams are aware of the changes. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of the new health and safety legislation, update Balfour-Beatty's internal policies and procedures accordingly, and implement comprehensive training programs for all affected employees, alongside robust monitoring systems. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where Balfour-Beatty, as a company operating within the UK construction sector, faces an implementation challenge regarding new health and safety regulations. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with strict adherence to legal obligations, ensuring the safety of all personnel and the public. Misinterpretation or inadequate implementation of these regulations can lead to severe consequences, including legal penalties, reputational damage, and most importantly, harm to individuals. Careful judgment is required to select the most effective and compliant approach. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive review of the new health and safety regulations, followed by a systematic update of Balfour-Beatty's existing policies and procedures. This includes thorough training for all relevant staff, clear communication of changes, and robust monitoring mechanisms to ensure compliance. This approach is justified by the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 1974, which places a general duty on employers to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health, safety, and welfare at work of all their employees. Furthermore, specific regulations such as the Construction, Design, and Management Regulations 2015, CDM regulations, mandate detailed planning, management, and monitoring of health and safety throughout construction projects. This systematic approach ensures that Balfour-Beatty not only meets its legal obligations, but also fosters a strong safety culture. An incorrect approach of merely acknowledging the new regulations without substantive policy changes fails to meet the employer's duty of care under the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 1974. This oversight can lead to non-compliance and potential prosecution. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on superficial training without updating underlying procedures, is also flawed. While training is crucial, it must be based on current, accurate, and legally compliant policies. Without this, training becomes ineffective and does not address the root cause of potential non-compliance. A third incorrect approach, prioritizing project timelines over regulatory compliance, directly contravenes the spirit and letter of health and safety legislation, which unequivocally places safety as a paramount concern, irrespective of project pressures. Such a stance demonstrates a disregard for legal duties and ethical responsibilities. Professional reasoning in such situations requires a structured decision-making process. This involves 1. Identifying the specific regulatory requirements and their implications for Balfour-Beatty's operations. 2. Assessing the gap between current practices and the new regulatory demands. 3. Developing a plan that addresses these gaps comprehensively, including policy updates, training, and resource allocation. 4. Implementing the plan with clear accountability and robust monitoring. 5. Regularly reviewing and adapting the approach based on feedback and evolving regulatory landscapes. This process ensures that Balfour-Beatty maintains a proactive and compliant stance on health and safety. Question 4. Market research demonstrates that Balfour-Beatty's recent project delays in a key infrastructure sector may have a material impact on its interim financial results. The company's investor relations team is considering how best to communicate this development to the market. Which of the following approaches best balances regulatory compliance, investor confidence, and the company's reputation? Option A. Delay any public communication until the project delays are fully resolved and the final financial impact is definitively calculated, to avoid any premature or inaccurate disclosures. Option B. Focus on managing internal communications and wait until the final interim results are published to disclose the full impact, aiming to minimize immediate negative market reaction. Option C. Proactively issue a trading update that clearly explains the reasons for the delays, quantifies the potential financial impact based on current estimates, and reiterates the company's long-term strategy and resilience. Option D. Issue a brief statement acknowledging potential challenges without providing specific details or revised financial estimates, citing ongoing internal reviews. The correct answer is C. Proactively issue a trading update that clearly explains the reasons for the delays, quantifies the potential financial impact based on current estimates, and reiterates the company's long-term strategy and resilience. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Balfour Beatty, as a publicly listed company, must navigate the complexities of financial reporting and investor relations while adhering to stringent regulatory requirements. The challenge lies in balancing the need for transparency with the potential for market sensitivity, ensuring that all disclosures are accurate, timely, and comply with the relevant accounting standards and listing rules. Careful judgment is required to determine the appropriate level of detail and the optimal timing for communicating significant financial developments. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive engagement with the market, providing a balanced overview of the company's performance and outlook. This includes clearly articulating the reasons behind any deviations from previous guidance, supported by robust internal analysis and projections. This approach aligns with the principles of fair disclosure and market integrity, as mandated by regulatory bodies like the Financial Conduct Authority, FCA, in the UK, and the principles of the UK Corporate Governance Code. It fosters investor confidence by demonstrating accountability and a commitment to open communication. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on minimizing negative perception risks undermining investor trust. This failure stems from a potential breach of the FCA's listing rules, which require timely disclosure of price-sensitive information. Omitting or downplaying material information, even with the intention of managing market sentiment, can be construed as misleading the market. Another incorrect approach that involves waiting for definitive, final figures before communicating any potential impact overlooks the importance of providing timely updates. This can lead to a significant information gap, allowing speculation to fill the void and potentially causing greater market volatility when the final figures are eventually released. This contravenes the principle of providing information as soon as possible, which is crucial for informed investment decisions. A third incorrect approach that relies on vague, noncommittal statements without providing any substantive explanation fails to meet the expectations of investors and regulators for clarity and substance. Such an approach can be seen as an attempt to avoid accountability and may lead to accusations of a lack of transparency, potentially triggering regulatory scrutiny. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, thoroughly assess the nature and materiality of the development. Second, consult with internal legal, finance, and investor relations teams to understand the regulatory implications and potential market impact. Third, develop a communication strategy that prioritizes accuracy, completeness, and timeliness, ensuring compliance with all applicable regulations and ethical standards. Finally, prepare for follow-up questions and be ready to provide further clarification as needed. Question 5. To address the challenge of ensuring all necessary safety protocols are in place before commencing work on a new Balfour Beatty infrastructure project, where preliminary site investigations have identified potential ground instability risks, which of the following actions best demonstrates adherence to UK health and safety regulations and professional best practice? Option A. Proceed with initial site preparation activities, while a comprehensive risk assessment and method statement, RAMS, is being developed and awaiting formal approval, relying on the site supervisor's immediate instructions to manage any emerging risks. Option B. Halt all site preparation activities until a fully approved and documented risk assessment and method statement, RAMS, that specifically addresses the identified ground instability risks has been completed, reviewed, and signed off by the relevant competent persons. Option C. Delegate the responsibility for assessing and managing the ground instability risks entirely to the subcontractors responsible for the initial site preparation, without Balfour Beatty conducting its own independent review or requiring formal documentation. Option D. Commence site preparation assuming that the identified ground instability risks are minor and can be managed through the use of standard personal protective equipment, PPE, by the workforce, without formal documentation. The correct answer is A. Proceed with initial site preparation activities while a comprehensive risk assessment and method statement, RAMS, is being developed and awaiting formal approval, relying on the site supervisor's immediate instructions to manage any emerging risks. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Balfour Beatty, as a large infrastructure company, operates within a highly regulated environment where compliance with health and safety legislation is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need to progress a project with the absolute requirement to ensure all safety protocols are rigorously followed, even when faced with pressure from stakeholders or tight deadlines. Careful judgment is required to avoid compromising safety for expediency, which could lead to severe legal repercussions, reputational damage, and, most importantly, harm to individuals. The correct approach involves proactively identifying potential hazards during the planning phase and implementing robust control measures, documented through a comprehensive risk assessment and method statement RAMS. This aligns with the UK's Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 1974, which places a general duty on employers to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health, safety, and welfare at work of all their employees and others who may be affected by their undertaking. It also reflects the principles of the Construction, Design and Management Regulations 2015, CDM regulations, which emphasize the importance of planning, managing, and monitoring health and safety throughout the life cycle of a construction project. This proactive and documented approach demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to a safe working environment. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with work without a fully approved RAMS, despite identifying potential hazards, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This directly contravenes the legal obligations under the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 1974 to manage risks. It also fails to adhere to the spirit and letter of the CDM regulations, which mandate the preparation and implementation of suitable arrangements for planning, managing, monitoring, and coordinating the construction phase. Such an approach creates an unacceptable level of risk, potentially leading to accidents, injuries, and breaches of statutory duty. Another incorrect approach, which is to rely solely on the site supervisor's verbal instructions to manage identified hazards, is also professionally unacceptable. While site supervisors play a crucial role, their verbal guidance is not a substitute for a formal, documented risk assessment and method statement. This failure to document and formally communicate safety procedures is a breach of the employer's duty to provide adequate information, instruction, training, and supervision under the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 1974. It also undermines the systematic approach to risk management required by the CDM regulations, making it difficult to demonstrate compliance or to learn from incidents. Professional reasoning framework for such situations involves a hierarchical approach to risk management: elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, and personal protective equipment, PPE. Before commencing any work, a thorough risk assessment must be conducted, identifying all foreseeable hazards. Based on this assessment, appropriate control measures must be devised, documented in a RAMS, and communicated to all relevant personnel. Any pressure to bypass these procedures should be resisted, and concerns should be escalated through the appropriate management channels. The ultimate decision must prioritize safety and legal compliance over project timelines or immediate cost considerations. Question 6. The review process indicates that a senior project manager at Balfour Beatty has a close personal relationship with a key decision maker at a major supplier company that is bidding for a significant contract. The project manager is involved in the evaluation of tender submissions. What is the most appropriate course of action for the project manager to take? Option A. Discuss the situation informally with a trusted colleague to gauge their opinion on whether it poses a significant issue before deciding on further action. Option B. Inform the supplier company of the relationship to ensure transparency and proceed with the evaluation, believing it will not influence their judgment. Option C. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their line manager and the Balfour Beatty Compliance Department, and recuse themselves from any involvement in the tender evaluation process for that supplier. Option D. Continue with the tender evaluation as normal, Assuming their professional integrity will ensure an objective assessment and not disclose the relationship unless specifically asked. The correct answer is C. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their line manager and the Balfour Beatty compliance department, and recuse themselves from any involvement in the tender evaluation process for that supplier. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because Balfour Beatty, as a large infrastructure group, operates within a highly regulated environment where adherence to ethical standards and legal frameworks is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient project delivery with the imperative to maintain the highest standards of integrity and compliance, especially when faced with potential conflicts of interest or situations that could be perceived as such. Careful judgment is required to navigate these complexities without compromising the company's reputation or legal standing. The correct approach involves proactively identifying and managing potential conflicts of interest by seeking independent advice and ensuring transparency. This demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance, safeguarding Balfour Beatty from reputational damage and legal repercussions. Specifically, seeking advice from the company's legal or compliance department, or external legal counsel if necessary, ensures that any potential conflict is assessed against relevant UK regulations and industry best practices, such as those promoted by CISI. This aligns with the principle of acting with integrity and due diligence, which are core tenets of professional conduct in the financial and construction sectors. An incorrect approach of proceeding without disclosing the potential conflict or seeking guidance risks violating ethical codes and potentially company policy. This could lead to accusations of impropriety, even if no actual wrongdoing occurred, due to the appearance of a conflict. Furthermore, failing to consult with legal or compliance experts means that Balfour Beatty might inadvertently breach specific UK regulations governing conflicts of interest, such as those related to procurement, contract negotiation, or insider information. Another incorrect approach of downplaying the significance of the relationship or assuming it poses no issue is equally problematic. This demonstrates a lack of professional skepticism and an underestimation of the importance of perceived impartiality. It bypasses the necessary due diligence required to ensure that all business dealings are conducted at arm's length and in the best interest of Balfour Beatty and its stakeholders, potentially leading to decisions that are influenced by personal relationships rather than objective commercial considerations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Recognition. Identify any situation that could present a conflict of interest, real or perceived. 2. Disclosure. Immediately disclose the potential conflict to the appropriate internal authority, e.g., line manager, compliance department. 3. Assessment. Allow the designated authority to assess the nature and severity of the conflict. 4. Guidance. Seek and follow the recommended course of action, which may include recusal from decision-making, seeking independent advice, or implementing specific controls. 5. Documentation. Ensure all steps taken and decisions made are properly documented. Question 7. What factors determine the appropriate level of health and safety oversight required for a new Balfour Beatty construction project, considering its complexity and the introduction of novel construction techniques? Option A. The general experience of the project management team in similar, but not identical, construction environments. Option B. The assumption that subcontractors possess superior knowledge of their specific work areas and will self-regulate all safety aspects. Option C. The perceived urgency of the project timeline and the availability of experienced personnel to address immediate issues. Option D. The thoroughness of the pre-commencement risk assessment, the clarity of the method statements, and the integration of specific control measures for novel techniques into the overall project safety plan. The correct answer is D. The thoroughness of the pre-commencement risk assessment, the clarity of the method statements, and the integration of specific control measures for novel techniques into the overall project safety plan. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in large infrastructure projects like those undertaken by Balfour Beatty, balancing the need for timely project delivery with the imperative to adhere to stringent health and safety regulations. The professional challenge lies in the potential conflict between commercial pressures to accelerate work and the non-negotiable requirement to ensure the safety of all personnel on site. Misjudging this balance can lead to severe consequences, including accidents, regulatory sanctions, reputational damage, and significant project delays and cost overruns, all of which directly impact Balfour Beatty's operational integrity and financial performance. Careful judgment is required to identify and mitigate risks proactively, ensuring that safety is never compromised for expediency. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment process that prioritizes the identification and mitigation of all potential health and safety hazards before any work commences. This includes a thorough review of method statements, site-specific risk assessments, and the implementation of appropriate control measures, such as personal protective equipment, PPE, safe work procedures, and adequate supervision. This approach is directly aligned with the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 1974, UK, which places a statutory duty on employers like Balfour Beatty to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health, safety, and welfare at work of all their employees and others who may be affected by their undertaking. It also reflects the principles of the Construction, Design, and Management Regulations 2015, CDM regulations, which mandate proactive planning, management, and monitoring of health and safety throughout the life cycle of a construction project. By embedding safety into the planning phase and ensuring all necessary precautions are in place, this approach upholds both legal obligations and ethical responsibilities, safeguarding individuals and the company. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding with work based on a general understanding of safety protocols without a detailed, site-specific risk assessment and method statement is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach disregards the fundamental principle of proactive risk management mandated by UK health and safety legislation, creates an environment where unforeseen hazards are likely to arise, increasing the probability of accidents and injuries. Relying solely on the experience of site supervisors to manage safety on the fly, without documented procedures and assessments, also constitutes a failure. While experienced personnel are valuable, their judgment alone cannot substitute for a systematic, documented approach to risk management. This can lead to inconsistent application of safety standards and a lack of accountability, violating the duty of care owed to employees under the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 1974. Assuming that subcontractors will independently manage all health and safety aspects of their work, without Balfour Beatty's oversight and integration into the overall project safety plan, is another critical failure. The CDM regulations place duties on clients, principal designers, and principal contractors to manage health and safety risks effectively, including those posed by subcontractors. A failure to coordinate and monitor subcontractor safety arrangements can lead to a breakdown in the safety management system, exposing workers to unacceptable risks and potentially breaching legal requirements. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Balfour Beatty should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes a robust, documented, and proactive health and safety management system. This involves 1. Understanding the legal and regulatory landscape, familiarity with the health and safety at work, etc. Act 1974 and the CDM Regulations 2015 is paramount. 2. Implementing a hierarchical approach to risk management, prioritizing elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, and finally, PPE. 3. Ensuring comprehensive planning and assessment, conducting thorough risk assessments and developing detailed method statements for all activities. 4. Establishing clear lines of responsibility and communication, ensuring all parties, including employees and subcontractors, understand their roles and responsibilities regarding safety. 5. Continuous monitoring and review, regularly inspecting work sites, reviewing safety performance, and adapting safety measures as necessary. 6. Fostering a strong safety culture, encouraging open reporting of hazards and near misses, and promoting a mindset where safety is everyone's responsibility. Question 8. Process analysis reveals that a new candidate onboarding module for Balfour Beatty is being developed. The project team is considering incorporating a section on data privacy that draws heavily from general GDPR principles. However, the Balfour Beatty hiring assessment test jurisdiction has its own specific data protection laws and guidelines that differ in certain aspects from GDPR. The team needs to decide how to proceed with the content for this section. Option A. Develop the data privacy section based on the team's collective understanding of data privacy, prioritizing ease of understanding for new hires over strict adherence to any single jurisdiction's specific regulations. Option B. Develop the data privacy section by integrating general GDPR principles with the specific laws of the Balfour Beatty hiring assessment test jurisdiction, assuming GDPR provides a comprehensive baseline. Option C. Develop the data privacy section using a blend of the most common international data privacy best practices, including elements from GDPR and other widely recognized frameworks, to ensure a robust and modern approach. Option D. Develop the data privacy section based exclusively on the specific data protection laws and guidelines of the Balfour Beatty hiring assessment test jurisdiction, ensuring no external regulations are referenced or applied. Correct answer is D. Develop the data privacy section based exclusively on the specific data protection laws and guidelines of the Balfour Beatty hiring assessment test jurisdiction, ensuring no external regulations are referenced or applied. Explanation. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in large organizations like Balfour Beatty, where the integration of new systems or processes must align with existing regulatory frameworks and ethical standards. The professional challenge lies in balancing the drive for efficiency and innovation with the absolute necessity of adhering to the specific regulatory requirements of the Balfour Beatty hiring assessment test jurisdiction. Misinterpreting or overlooking these requirements can lead to significant compliance breaches, reputational damage, and potential legal repercussions. The correct approach involves a meticulous review and application of the specified regulatory framework and guidelines for the Balfour Beatty hiring assessment test. This means ensuring that any proposed solution or action directly addresses the requirements as laid out in that specific jurisdiction's laws and the assessment's internal guidelines. The justification for this approach is rooted in the principle of absolute priority for regulatory compliance. Failure to adhere to the defined jurisdiction's framework is a direct violation of the assessment's core instructions, and by extension, the principles of professional conduct expected within that context. An incorrect approach would be to assume that general best practices or regulations from other jurisdictions are applicable. This is a critical failure because the question explicitly mandates adherence to a singular, defined regulatory framework. Introducing external or generic regulations demonstrates a lack of attention to detail and an inability to follow precise instructions, which are fundamental skills assessed in a hiring context. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed or perceived efficiency over strict adherence to the specified rules. This indicates a misunderstanding of the assessment's purpose, which is to evaluate the candidate's ability to operate within a defined and often complex regulatory environment. Such a failure undermines the integrity of the assessment process and suggests a candidate who might be prone to cutting corners in a professional setting. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a thorough understanding of the specific constraints and requirements of the task or assessment. This involves carefully reading and internalizing all instructions, particularly those related to jurisdiction and applicable regulations. When faced with a choice, the professional should always default to the most restrictive and specific requirements provided, especially when an absolute priority is stated. If there is any ambiguity, seeking clarification within the defined parameters of the assessment or task is crucial, rather than making assumptions or applying external knowledge. Question 9. System analysis indicates that a significant infrastructure project managed by Balfour Beatty is facing pressure to reduce reported costs in the current financial period. A junior finance team member has proposed an accounting treatment for a complex contractual arrangement that, while technically arguable under certain interpretations of UK GAAP, would significantly reduce the current period's reported expenses by deferring recognition of certain costs. This proposal has not been subjected to a full internal review or consultation with external auditors. What is the most appropriate course of action for the senior finance management at Balfour Beatty? Option A. Immediately implement the proposed accounting treatment as it offers a clear cost-saving benefit for the current period, with a detailed review to follow if required by auditors. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive review of the proposed accounting treatment, involving relevant technical accounting specialists and potentially the external auditors, to determine the most appropriate and compliant accounting treatment under UK GAAP and company policy, ensuring full documentation of the decision-making process. Option C. Reject the proposed accounting treatment outright due to the potential for aggressive accounting practices and instruct the team to adhere to the most conservative interpretation of UK GAAP, even if it means higher current period costs. Option D. Advise the junior team member to reevaluate the proposal to find an even more aggressive accounting method that would yield greater cost savings, as this is a priority for the project. The correct answer is A. Immediately implement the proposed accounting treatment as it offers a clear cost-saving benefit for the current period, with a detailed review to follow if required by auditors. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a project's immediate cost-saving pressures and Balfour Beatty's long-term commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. The need to balance financial targets with the integrity of financial reporting requires careful judgment. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented review of all potential accounting treatments, consulting with internal and external experts, and adhering strictly to the relevant accounting standards and company policies. This ensures that financial statements are not only compliant with UK Generally Accepted Accounting Practice, UK GAAP, but also reflect the true economic substance of transactions, thereby upholding Balfour Beatty's reputation for transparency and integrity. This aligns with the principles of professional accountants as outlined by the Financial Reporting Council, FRC, and the ethical codes of professional bodies like the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, IQ, which mandate objectivity, integrity, and professional competence. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost reduction without adequate justification or documentation would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to misstated financial reports, violating UK GAAP and potentially the Companies Act 2006. Such an action would demonstrate a lack of professional skepticism and integrity, exposing Balfour Beatty to regulatory scrutiny, fines, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, that of selectively applying accounting standards to achieve a desired financial outcome, is also professionally unsound. This practice undermines the consistency and comparability of financial information, which are fundamental principles of UK GAAP. It suggests an intent to manipulate financial results rather than present a true and fair view, constituting a breach of ethical duties and potentially leading to accusations of fraudulent reporting. Finally, an approach that bypasses established internal controls and expert consultation in favor of a quick decision based on expediency would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This demonstrates a disregard for robust financial governance and the importance of independent verification, increasing the risk of errors and misrepresentations. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a structured process. First, clearly identify the accounting issue and relevant regulations. Second, gather all necessary information and seek expert advice. Third, evaluate alternative accounting treatments against the principles of UK GAAP and company policy. And fourth, document the chosen treatment and the rationale behind it, ensuring transparency and accountability. Question 10. The efficiency study reveals potential cost savings through streamlining site management processes at Balfour Beatty. However, some proposed streamlining measures could impact existing safety protocols and require adjustments to contractual reporting timelines. Which of the following represents the most professionally responsible approach for Balfour Beatty's management to consider? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review of the efficiency study's recommendation, cross-referencing them with all relevant UK construction legislation, health and safety regulations, and SISI professional conduct guidelines to ensure full compliance before any implementation. Option B. Delegate the review of safety protocol impacts to site supervisors and the reporting timeline adjustments to administrative staff, with the expectation that they will identify and resolve any compliance issues independently. Option C. Prioritize the implementation of the most significant cost-saving measures first, deferring a detailed regulatory review until after initial savings have been achieved and operational disruptions have subsided. Option D. Immediately implement the proposed process changes to realize the identified cost savings, assuming that minor adjustments to safety protocols are manageable and reporting timelines can be retrospectively aligned. The correct answer is D. Immediately implement the proposed process changes to realize the identified cost savings, assuming that minor adjustments to safety protocols are manageable and reporting timelines can be retrospectively aligned. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Balfour Beatty, as a large infrastructure company, operates within a highly regulated environment. The efficiency study's findings, if not handled appropriately, could have significant implications for compliance, stakeholder trust, and the company's reputation. The core challenge lies in balancing the drive for operational improvement with the absolute necessity of adhering to all relevant UK regulatory frameworks and SISI guidelines. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any proposed changes do not inadvertently lead to breaches of legal or ethical standards. Correct approach involves a thorough review of the efficiency study's recommendations against the specific requirements of UK construction law, health and safety legislation, and relevant SISI professional conduct rules. This approach prioritizes understanding the regulatory landscape before implementing any changes. It ensures that Balfour Beatty maintains its commitment to operating legally and ethically, safeguarding its employees, the public, and its business interests. This aligns with the SISI emphasis on integrity and professional diligence, requiring members to act in accordance with the law and to uphold the reputation of the profession. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering regulatory implications would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to breaches of health and safety regulations, potentially resulting in fines, project delays, and severe reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that involves bypassing established procurement procedures to expedite efficiency gains would violate principles of good governance and potentially anti-bribery legislation, undermining fair competition and increasing the risk of fraud. A third incorrect approach that involves overlooking the need for employee consultation on changes that affect working practices would contravene employment law and ethical considerations regarding employee welfare and engagement, potentially leading to industrial disputes and a decline in morale. Professionals at Balfour Beatty should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the regulatory context. This involves identifying all applicable laws, regulations, and professional standards. Subsequently, proposed actions should be assessed for their compliance with these frameworks. Where potential conflicts or ambiguities arise, seeking expert legal or compliance advice is crucial. This proactive and diligent approach ensures that efficiency initiatives are implemented responsibly and sustainably, upholding Balfour Beatty's commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory adherence. Question 11. System analysis indicates that Balfour Beatty is preparing to subcontract a significant portion of a publicly funded infrastructure project. The project requires specialized engineering services, and a particular supplier has consistently delivered high-quality work on previous Balfour Beatty projects. To expedite the project timeline, there is internal pressure to directly appoint this familiar supplier without conducting a formal tender process. Considering the UK's regulatory framework for public procurement, what is the most appropriate course of action for Balfour Beatty? Option A. Seek informal quotes from a small, pre-selected group of known suppliers, including the familiar one, and select the most cost-effective option. Option B. Conduct a competitive tender process in accordance with the Public Contracts Regulations 2015, ensuring all eligible suppliers have an equal opportunity to bid for the subcontract. Option C. Directly award the subcontract to the familiar supplier based on their proven track record and to expedite project delivery. Option D. Rely solely on the historical performance data of the familiar supplier to justify their direct appointment, assuming their past quality guarantees future performance. Correct answer is B. Conduct a competitive tender process in accordance with the Public Contracts Regulations 2015, ensuring all eligible suppliers have an equal opportunity to bid for the subcontract. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Balfour Beatty, as a large infrastructure group, operates within a highly regulated environment where adherence to procurement laws and ethical conduct is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient project delivery with the legal and ethical obligations to ensure fair competition and value for money in public sector contracts. Misinterpreting or circumventing procurement regulations can lead to legal challenges, reputational damage, and financial penalties, undermining the company's integrity and future bidding opportunities. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and strict application of the UK's Public Contracts Regulations 2015. This approach prioritizes transparency, fairness, and competition throughout the procurement process. Specifically, It mandates that Balfour Beatty must conduct a competitive tender process for contracts exceeding the relevant threshold, ensuring all eligible suppliers have an equal opportunity to bid. This aligns with the regulatory framework's objective of achieving best value for public funds and preventing favoritism or corruption. An incorrect approach that involves directly awarding a subcontract to a known supplier without a competitive process, even if that supplier has a good track record, fails to comply with the Public Contracts Regulations 2015. This bypasses the requirement for open competition, potentially excluding more competitive or innovative suppliers, and failing to demonstrate value for money. Ethically, it raises concerns about fairness and transparency. Another incorrect approach, such as seeking only a limited number of quotes from pre-selected suppliers without a clear justification for excluding others, also falls short. While it might appear more efficient than a full tender, it still risks limiting competition and may not meet the spirit or letter of the regulations, which generally require a broader and more objective selection process for significant contracts. This can be seen as a form of managed competition rather than true open tendering. A third incorrect approach, which is to rely solely on historical relationships and past performance without a formal evaluation of current market offerings, is also problematic. While past performance is a factor, it does not absolve Balfour Beatty from the obligation to assess current market conditions, pricing, and capabilities through a structured and documented process. This can lead to suboptimal outcomes and a failure to leverage new market entrants or technological advancements. The professional reasoning process for Balfour Beatty in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the applicable procurement thresholds and regulations. Before initiating any subcontracting process for a public sector project, a review of the Public Contracts Regulations 2015 should be conducted to determine the appropriate procurement route. This should be followed by a documented decision-making process that clearly outlines the chosen method, the rationale behind it, and how it ensures fairness, transparency, and value for money. Engaging with legal and procurement specialists within Balfour Beatty is crucial to navigate these complexities and ensure compliance. Question 12. System analysis indicates a need to procure a critical component for an upcoming infrastructure project managed by Balfour Beatty. A long-standing supplier has consistently delivered this component in the past. However, to ensure best value and compliance with procurement best practices, what is the most professionally sound approach for Balfour Beatty to take in selecting a supplier for this new contract? Option A. Directly award the contract to the long-standing supplier based on their proven track record and established relationship. Option B. Initiate a formal tender process, inviting multiple qualified suppliers to bid, and evaluate submissions against predefined criteria that include price, quality, delivery capability, and compliance. Option C. Rely on informal discussions with a few trusted suppliers, including the long-standing one, and select the one that seems most agreeable at the time. Option D. Solely focus on obtaining the lowest possible price from any supplier, without detailed consideration of their quality, delivery timelines, or overall compliance. The correct answer is A. Directly award the contract to the long-standing supplier based on their proven track record and established relationship. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Balfour Beatty, as a large infrastructure group, operates within a highly regulated environment where adherence to specific procurement and ethical guidelines is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient project delivery with the imperative to maintain fair competition and prevent any perception of impropriety. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all procurement processes are transparent, justifiable, and compliant with the relevant UK regulatory framework, particularly concerning public sector contracts and company policy. The correct approach involves a structured and documented process for evaluating and selecting suppliers, prioritizing value for money and adherence to Balfour Beatty's own stringent ethical and procurement standards. This approach is right because it directly aligns with the principles of good governance and responsible business conduct expected of a company like Balfour Beatty. Specifically, it upholds the spirit and letter of UK procurement regulations, which emphasize transparency, fairness, and accountability. By seeking multiple competitive bids and conducting a thorough, documented evaluation against predefined criteria, Balfour Beatty demonstrates a commitment to avoiding bias and ensuring that public funds, if applicable, or company resources are used effectively and ethically. This also aligns with the principles of the UK Bribery Act 2010, which requires robust procedures to prevent bribery. An incorrect approach of directly awarding a contract to a long-standing supplier without a competitive tender process would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of transparency and fairness, potentially violating procurement regulations that mandate competitive tendering for significant contracts to ensure value for money and prevent favoritism. It also creates an ethical risk, as it could be perceived as a conflict of interest or an attempt to circumvent proper due diligence, potentially exposing Balfour Beatty to accusations of impropriety or even breaches of anti-bribery legislation. Another incorrect approach of relying solely on informal discussions and past performance without a formal evaluation framework is also professionally unacceptable. While past performance is a factor, it cannot be the sole determinant. This approach lacks the necessary documentation and objective criteria required by procurement regulations and good governance. It opens the door to subjective decision-making, which can lead to bias and a failure to identify potentially better or more cost-effective solutions from other suppliers. This also fails to meet the due diligence requirements that would be expected under UK law and company policy to ensure responsible contracting. A third incorrect approach of prioritizing the supplier offering the lowest price without considering quality, delivery, or compliance would be professionally unacceptable. While cost is a significant factor, procurement regulations and best practice emphasize achieving the best overall value for money, which encompasses a balance of price, quality, risk, and other relevant factors. Ignoring these other critical elements can lead to project delays, substandard outcomes, and increased long-term costs, ultimately failing to serve the best interests of Balfour Beatty or its stakeholders. This approach also risks non-compliance with project specifications and contractual obligations. The professional reasoning framework for such situations should involve a clear understanding of Balfour Beatty's internal procurement policies, relevant UK legislation, such as the Public Contracts Regulations 2015 if public sector contracts are involved, and the Bribery Act 2010, and ethical codes of conduct. Professionals should always follow a structured procurement process that includes defining clear requirements, establishing objective evaluation criteria, seeking competitive bids, conducting thorough due diligence on potential suppliers, documenting all decisions and justifications, and ensuring transparency throughout the process. When in doubt, seeking guidance from legal or procurement departments is crucial. Question 13. System analysis indicates a potential safety hazard has been observed by a site operative on a Balfour Beatty construction project, specifically concerning the integrity of temporary scaffolding. The operative has reported the observation to their immediate supervisor, who is under pressure to maintain project timelines. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the site supervisor to ensure compliance with Balfour Beatty's health and safety obligations? Option A. Instruct the operative to continue working, while a brief visual inspection of the scaffolding is conducted by the supervisor to determine if it is a significant issue. Option B. Advise the operative to ignore the observation as it is likely a minor issue and not worth delaying the project for. Option C. Immediately halt all work in the vicinity of the observed scaffolding and initiate a formal investigation involving qualified personnel to assess the risk and implement necessary remedial actions. Option D. Delegate the responsibility of investigating the scaffolding issue to a junior member of the site team to minimize disruption to ongoing activities. The correct answer is C. Immediately halt all work in the vicinity of the observed scaffolding and initiate a formal investigation involving qualified personnel to assess the risk and implement necessary remedial actions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Balfour Beatty, as a large infrastructure company, operates within a highly regulated environment where compliance with health and safety legislation is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for project progress with the absolute requirement to adhere to safety protocols, especially when a potential breach is identified. Careful judgment is required to ensure that neither the project timeline nor the safety of personnel is compromised. The correct approach involves immediately halting work in the affected area and initiating a thorough investigation. This aligns with the fundamental principles of health and safety legislation, which places a duty of care on employers to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of their employees and others affected by their undertaking. Specifically, This approach reflects the proactive and preventative measures mandated by regulations such as the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 1974, UK, which requires employers to identify hazards, assess risks, and implement control measures. By stopping work, Balfour Beatty demonstrates a commitment to its legal and ethical obligations to prevent harm, prioritizing safety over expediency. This also aligns with SISI Ethical Code, which emphasizes integrity and acting in the best interests of all stakeholders, including employees. An incorrect approach would be to continue work while a superficial review is conducted. This fails to adequately address the potential risk and could lead to serious accidents or injuries, violating the duty of care and specific provisions within health and safety legislation that require immediate action when a hazard is identified. It also demonstrates a lack of integrity and disregard for the well-being of workers, contrary to ethical codes. Another incorrect approach would be to delegate the investigation to a junior site engineer without adequate oversight or authority. This undermines the seriousness of the potential safety breach and may result in an incomplete or biased investigation, failing to identify the root cause and implement effective corrective actions. It also fails to uphold the principle of accountability inherent in health and safety management. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to downplay the significance of the observation and proceed with work based on assumptions that it is a minor issue. This is a direct contravention of the precautionary principle embedded in health and safety law, which dictates that where there is a risk of harm, even if not fully proven, preventative measures should be taken. It also demonstrates a failure to act with due diligence and could expose Balfour Beatty to significant legal and reputational damage. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and compliance. This involves 1. Recognizing and reporting potential hazards immediately. 2. Following established procedures for risk assessment and incident investigation. 3. Escalating concerns to appropriate levels of management. 4. Ensuring that all actions taken are documented and justifiable under relevant legislation and ethical guidelines. The ultimate goal is to foster a culture of safety where all employees feel empowered to raise concerns and where the organization responds proactively and effectively to mitigate risks. Question 14. The control framework reveals a potential deviation from the approved method statement for a critical construction activity on a Balfour Beatty project. The site supervisor believes the deviation is minor and unlikely to impact safety, but it has not been formally assessed or approved. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the Balfour Beatty employee who identified this potential deviation? Option A. Immediately halt the specific activity until the deviation is formally reviewed and approved according to established procedures. Option B. Seek informal verbal approval from a senior colleague to proceed with the activity as is. Option C. Proceed with the activity, assuming the deviation is minor and can be corrected after completion. Option D. Continue the activity and report the deviation to the project manager at the end of the shift. The correct answer is A. Immediately halt the specific activity until the deviation is formally reviewed and approved according to established procedures. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Balfour Beatty, as a large infrastructure group, operates within a highly regulated environment where adherence to safety standards is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for project progress with the absolute requirement to ensure all safety protocols are rigorously followed, especially when a potential deviation is identified. A failure to address this could lead to serious safety incidents, regulatory penalties, and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to determine the appropriate course of action that prioritizes safety without unduly hindering legitimate operational needs. The correct approach involves immediately halting the specific activity where the potential deviation from the control framework has been identified and initiating a formal review process. This aligns with the principle of safety first embedded in UK health and safety legislation, such as the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 1974, which places a duty on employers to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health, safety, and welfare at work of all their employees and others who may be affected by their undertaking. It also reflects best practice in risk management, where identified risks must be assessed and mitigated before work proceeds. This proactive stance ensures that any potential hazards are addressed before they can cause harm, thereby upholding Balfour Beatty's commitment to a safe working environment and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the activity, while assuming the deviation is minor or can be corrected later. This fails to acknowledge the potential for unforeseen consequences and directly contravenes the precautionary principle inherent in safety regulations. It demonstrates a disregard for established procedures and a lack of due diligence, which could lead to accidents, injuries, and breaches of statutory duties. Another incorrect approach would be to bypass the formal review process and seek informal approval from a supervisor without documenting the issue or the proposed resolution. This undermines the integrity of the control framework and creates a risk of inconsistent application of safety standards. It also prevents a thorough assessment of the deviation's impact and potential alternatives, potentially leading to the adoption of unsafe practices. A further incorrect approach would be to continue the activity and only report the deviation after the work is completed. This is reactive rather than proactive and misses the opportunity to prevent harm. It also suggests a culture where reporting safety concerns is seen as a post-mortem exercise rather than an integral part of ongoing risk management. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the company's control framework and relevant legislation. When a potential deviation is identified, the professional should 1. Immediately assess the immediate risk. 2. If there is any doubt about safety, halt the activity. 3. Follow the documented procedure for reporting and reviewing deviations. 4. Ensure that any resolution is formally approved and documented. 5. Only resume the activity once it has been confirmed that all safety requirements are met. This systematic approach ensures that safety remains the overriding priority and that Balfour Beatty's operations are conducted in a compliant and responsible manner. Question 15. The performance metrics show a concerning trend in safety incident reporting across several Balfour Beatty project sites. What is the most appropriate initial step to address this trend? Option A. Conduct a detailed, site-specific investigation into the contributing factors behind the reported trend, involving site management and safety officers. Option B. Immediately implement a company-wide mandatory safety retraining program for all site personnel. Option C. Reassign project managers at the affected sites based on the assumption of leadership failure. Option D. Temporarily halt all non-essential site operations until the safety metrics improve. Correct answer is B. Immediately implement a company-wide mandatory safety retraining program for all site personnel. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Balfour Beatty, as a large infrastructure company, operates within a highly regulated environment where adherence to safety standards is paramount. The performance metrics indicating a potential decline in safety compliance require immediate and thorough investigation, as any lapse can have severe consequences, including harm to personnel, damage to reputation, and significant legal and financial penalties. The challenge lies in balancing the need for swift action with the requirement for a fair and accurate assessment of the situation, ensuring that any implemented changes are effective and compliant with relevant UK health and safety legislation, such as the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 1974 and associated regulations. Correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based investigation into the root causes of the performance metric changes. This entails gathering detailed data, consulting with site teams, and reviewing existing safety procedures and their implementation. The justification for this approach is rooted in the principles of due diligence and proactive risk management mandated by UK health and safety law. It ensures that any interventions are targeted, proportionate, and address the actual issues rather than superficial symptoms. This aligns with the ethical obligation to protect employees and the public, and the legal duty of care that Balfour Beatty owes to its workforce and stakeholders. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement broad, punitive measures without a proper understanding of the underlying causes. This could involve imposing stricter, unproven protocols or penalizing teams based solely on the initial metrics. Such actions would be professionally unsound as they fail to address the root of the problem, potentially leading to decreased morale, resistance to change, and a false sense of security if the actual issues are not resolved. Ethically, it is unfair to penalize individuals or teams without a thorough investigation. Legally, it could be seen as a failure to adequately discharge the duty of care if the implemented measures are not demonstrably effective in improving safety, or if they create new, unforeseen risks. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the metrics as statistical anomalies without further inquiry. This demonstrates a lack of professional diligence and a failure to heed potential warning signs, which is a direct contravention of the proactive safety culture expected within the construction industry and mandated by regulatory bodies. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, acknowledge and validate the data. Second, initiate a comprehensive, objective investigation to identify root causes. Third, consult with relevant stakeholders, including safety officers and site management. Fourth, develop and implement targeted, evidence-based solutions. And finally, monitor the effectiveness of these solutions and adapt as necessary. This iterative process ensures continuous improvement and robust safety management. Question 16. Strategic planning requires Balfour Beatty to evaluate a significant new infrastructure project bid. The proposed contract includes clauses that, while common in international markets, may not align with current UK regulatory frameworks concerning fair competition and ethical procurement. What is the most appropriate approach for Balfour Beatty to take to ensure compliance and a successful bid? Option A. Rely on the client's assurances that the contract is compliant with all applicable laws and proceed with the bid without independent legal review. Option B. Proceed with the bid as is, assuming standard industry practices will be accepted, and address any potential regulatory issues if they arise post-award. Option C. Seek to negotiate the contract terms to remove any clauses that appear ambiguous regarding UK regulations, even if it means significantly altering the project's commercial viability. Option D. Immediately engage Balfour Beatty's legal and compliance departments to conduct a thorough review of the contract against relevant UK legislation and industry guidelines, proposing necessary amendments to ensure full compliance before submission. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the bid as is, assuming standard industry practices will be accepted, and address any potential regulatory issues if they arise post-award. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Balfour Beatty due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need to secure a significant contract and the regulatory obligation to ensure all bidding processes are conducted with integrity and transparency. The pressure to win can lead to overlooking or downplaying potential compliance risks, which could have severe consequences, including reputational damage, financial penalties, and debarment from future projects. Careful judgment is required to balance commercial objectives with legal and ethical responsibilities. The correct approach involves a proactive and thorough risk assessment of the proposed contractual terms and associated regulatory compliance obligations. This includes engaging legal and compliance teams early to identify any potential breaches of UK regulations, such as those related to anti-bribery and corruption, competition law, or specific industry standards governed by bodies like the Health and Safety Executive, HSE, or the Competition and Markets Authority, CMA. By meticulously reviewing the contract against these frameworks, Balfour Beatty can identify areas of concern, propose necessary amendments, and ensure the bid is compliant before submission. This demonstrates a commitment to ethical business practices and adherence to the law, safeguarding the company's long-term interests. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over compliance would be to proceed with the bid without a comprehensive review of the contractual terms against UK regulatory requirements. This could lead to inadvertently agreeing to terms that violate anti-bribery laws, such as clauses that could be interpreted as facilitating illicit payments or engaging in anti-competitive practices. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that standard contract clauses are automatically compliant, without specific due diligence related to the project's jurisdiction and nature. This overlooks the fact that regulatory landscapes evolve and specific project contexts can introduce unique compliance challenges. Furthermore, attempting to interpret away potential regulatory conflicts without seeking expert legal advice is a dangerous path, as it can be seen as a deliberate attempt to circumvent obligations, leading to severe ethical and legal repercussions. Professionals at Balfour Beatty should employ a decision-making framework that integrates compliance into the strategic planning process from the outset. This involves establishing clear internal policies and procedures for contract review, ensuring adequate resources are allocated to legal and compliance functions, and fostering a culture where raising compliance concerns is encouraged and rewarded. When faced with a situation like this, the process should involve 1. Identifying the potential regulatory touchpoints of the contract. 2. Conducting a detailed risk assessment against relevant UK legislation and industry guidelines. 3. Consulting with legal and compliance experts to interpret findings and propose mitigation strategies. 4. Documenting the entire review process and the rationale for any decisions made. This systematic approach ensures that commercial opportunities are pursued responsibly and ethically. Question 17. System analysis indicates that Balfour Beatty is preparing to engage a subcontractor for a significant portion of a publicly funded infrastructure project. To expedite the process and leverage a pre-existing positive working relationship, the project manager is considering awarding the contract directly to a known supplier without conducting a formal competitive tender. Which of the following approaches best adheres to the regulatory framework governing public procurement in the UK? Option A. Divide the total scope of work into several smaller contracts, each below the regulatory threshold for full competitive tendering, and award them individually to preferred suppliers. Option B. Award the contract directly to the known supplier based on the established relationship and perceived efficiency, documenting the decision as an exception due to time constraints. Option C. Conduct a full, competitive tender process, clearly defining the scope of works and objective evaluation criteria, and formally assessing all submitted bids against these criteria before awarding the contract. Option D. Prioritize the supplier offering the absolute lowest price, irrespective of their technical capabilities, past performance, or the overall value proposition for the project. The correct answer is C. Conduct a full, competitive tender process, clearly defining the scope of works and objective evaluation criteria, and formally assessing all submitted bids against these criteria before awarding the contract. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Balfour Beatty, as a large infrastructure group, operates within a highly regulated environment where adherence to specific procurement and ethical guidelines is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient project delivery with the absolute requirement to comply with the Public Contracts Regulations 2015, PCR 2015, and the company's internal ethical procurement policies. Misinterpreting or circumventing these regulations can lead to legal challenges, reputational damage, and financial penalties. The correct approach involves a rigorous and transparent process for selecting subcontractors, ensuring that all potential suppliers are treated equitably, and that the selection is based on objective criteria aligned with the PCR 2015 principles of transparency, equal treatment, and non-discrimination. This includes a clear, documented evaluation of bids against predefined award criteria, which may encompass quality, technical capability, and price, but always within the bounds of fair competition. This aligns with the overarching goal of public procurement to achieve value for money while upholding probity and preventing corruption or favoritism, as mandated by the PCR 2015. An incorrect approach would be to favor a known subcontractor without a formal, competitive tender process. This directly contravenes the PCR 2015, which mandates competitive tendering for public contracts above certain thresholds. Such an action would breach the principles of equal treatment and transparency, potentially leading to challenges from other suppliers and regulatory scrutiny. Another incorrect approach would be to artificially split the contract into smaller lots to avoid the full application of the PCR 2015. This is a common tactic to circumvent procurement rules and is considered a breach of the regulations, as it undermines the intent of fair competition and can lead to less value for money. The regulations are designed to prevent such fragmentation. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to solely base the decision on the lowest price without considering other crucial factors like quality, technical expertise, and the subcontractor's track record. While price is a significant factor, the PCR 2015 allows for the award of contracts based on the most economically advantageous tender, MEET, which requires a holistic evaluation of various criteria, not just cost. Ignoring these other factors can lead to suboptimal project outcomes and potential future issues. Professionals at Balfour Beatty should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the specific procurement thresholds and applicable regulations. In this case, the PCR 2015. This involves establishing clear, objective evaluation criteria before the tender process begins, ensuring all potential bidders are treated fairly and transparently, and maintaining thorough documentation of the entire procurement process. When in doubt, seeking legal or expert procurement advice is crucial to ensure compliance and mitigate risk. Question 18. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a proposed shortcut in the installation of a critical structural component for a Balfour Beatty project could save £50,000 and shave 2 weeks off the schedule. However, this shortcut deviates from the approved safety method statement, which was developed in accordance with UK construction regulations. The project manager is under pressure to meet tight deadlines and budget constraints. Which approach best upholds Balfour Beatty's professional and regulatory obligations? Option A. Implement the shortcut but reduce the frequency of safety inspections for that specific component to offset the perceived minor increase in risk. Option B. Proceed with the originally approved safety method, even if it incurs the additional cost and time, and document the rationale for not adopting the shortcut. Option C. Use the £50,000 saved from the shortcut to fund additional safety training for the site team, thereby mitigating any potential risks. Option D. Implement the shortcut as it offers significant cost and time savings, and the risk of an incident is assessed as low. Correct answer is D. Implement the shortcut as it offers significant cost and time savings, and the risk of an incident is assessed as low. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in large infrastructure projects like those undertaken by Balfour Beatty, where the immediate financial benefits of a proposed shortcut might appear attractive, but the long-term implications for safety and regulatory compliance are significant. The professional challenge lies in balancing project timelines and budgets against the paramount duty to uphold safety standards and adhere to all relevant UK regulations and industry best practices, particularly those governed by bodies like the Health and Safety Executive, HSE, and potentially SISI guidelines for financial conduct if applicable to the project financing. The pressure to deliver within budget and on schedule can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential risks, making rigorous adherence to established procedures critical. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves prioritizing the full implementation of the approved safety protocols, even if it incurs additional costs or delays. This aligns directly with the fundamental principles of UK health and safety legislation, such as the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 1974, which places a duty on employers to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health, safety, and welfare at work of all their employees and others who may be affected by their undertaking. Furthermore, specific construction regulations, like the Construction, Design and Management Regulations 2015, CDM, mandate comprehensive risk assessments and the implementation of appropriate control measures. Choosing to proceed with the established safe method despite the cost implications demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance, ethical responsibility, and the protection of life and limb, which are non-negotiable in the construction industry. This upholds Balfour Beatty's reputation and avoids potential legal repercussions, fines, and reputational damage. Incorrect approaches analysis. Adopting the shortcut without further review or approval, despite the cost savings, represents a severe regulatory and ethical failure. It directly contravenes the duty of care owed to workers and the public, and likely breaches specific provisions within CDM regulations regarding the management of risks. This approach prioritizes short-term financial gain over safety, which is fundamentally unethical and illegal. Proposing to implement the shortcut, but with a reduced level of oversight or a less stringent inspection regime, is also unacceptable. While it acknowledges the shortcut, it still compromises the integrity of the safety system. This demonstrates a misunderstanding of risk management principles and a failure to comply with the spirit, if not the letter, of regulations that require robust monitoring and verification of safety measures. It creates a false sense of security and significantly increases the likelihood of an incident. Suggesting that the cost savings from the shortcut be used to fund additional safety training without actually implementing the original, safer procedure is a flawed approach. While training is important, it cannot compensate for a fundamentally unsafe method or a compromised safety system. The primary focus must be on eliminating or adequately controlling hazards at the source, not on mitigating the consequences of an inherently risky practice. This approach misdirects resources and fails to address the root cause of the safety concern. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Balfour Beatty should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of all applicable UK regulations and company policies. When faced with a conflict between cost efficiency and safety, the hierarchy of controls must be applied, prioritizing elimination and substitution of hazards. Any proposed deviation from approved safety protocols must trigger a formal review process involving safety officers and relevant stakeholders. The decision must be based on a comprehensive risk assessment that considers all potential consequences, not just financial ones. If a shortcut is proposed, it must be rigorously evaluated against the original safety plan and regulatory requirements. If it cannot be proven to be equally or more safe, it should be rejected. The professional's duty is to advocate for the safest and most compliant course of action, even if it is more expensive or time-consuming, and to escalate concerns if their judgment is overruled. Question 19. The audit findings indicate that Balfour Beatty's project management team has consistently failed to adhere to specific contractual clauses related to material sourcing, potentially exposing the company to regulatory sanctions. Which of the following represents the most professionally responsible approach to addressing these findings? Option A. Focus on negotiating with the client to amend the relevant contractual clauses to reflect current sourcing practices, thereby mitigating the immediate risk of sanctions. Option B. Issue a company-wide memo emphasizing the importance of contractual compliance and instruct project managers to self-correct any identified deviations without further investigation. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive root cause analysis of the noncompliance. Develop a detailed corrective action plan with clear timelines and responsibilities, and establish a monitoring mechanism to ensure its effectiveness. Option D. Immediately implement a new, simplified material sourcing checklist for all future projects, and communicate this to the project teams. The correct answer is D. Immediately implement a new, simplified material sourcing checklist for all future projects, and communicate this to the project teams. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need to address audit findings with the long-term implications of how Balfour Beatty responds to regulatory scrutiny. The pressure to demonstrate swift action can sometimes lead to superficial or non-compliant solutions. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any corrective actions are not only effective, but also align with the company's ethical obligations and the specific regulatory framework governing its operations. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented investigation into the root causes of the audit findings, followed by the development and implementation of a robust corrective action plan that is then monitored for effectiveness. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory compliance, which mandate that companies take reasonable steps to identify, address, and prevent future occurrences of noncompliance. Specifically, this approach demonstrates a commitment to continuous improvement and adherence to the spirit and letter of the law, which is often implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory bodies overseeing companies like Balfour Beatty. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate superficial fixes, without understanding the underlying issues, fails to address the systemic problems that led to the audit findings. This can result in recurring issues and further regulatory penalties, as it does not demonstrate a genuine commitment to compliance. Another incorrect approach, which involves withholding information or downplaying the severity of the findings, is ethically unsound and can lead to severe legal repercussions, including fines and reputational damage, as it obstructs regulatory oversight and potentially violates disclosure requirements. Finally, an approach that prioritizes cost saving over thorough remediation, even if it appears to resolve the immediate issue, risks creating future problems and demonstrates a lack of due diligence, which is a fundamental expectation under most regulatory frameworks. Professionals in such situations should employ a structured decision-making process. This involves 1. Clearly understanding the nature and scope of the audit findings. 2. Identifying the specific regulatory requirements that have been potentially breached. 3. Evaluating potential corrective actions based on their effectiveness, feasibility, and compliance with regulations and ethical standards. 4. Documenting the entire process, from investigation to implementation and monitoring. 5. Seeking expert advice if necessary, particularly on complex regulatory matters. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with the company's responsibilities. Question 20. Operational review demonstrates that a critical section of the Balfour Beatty construction site has been identified as having inadequate safety barriers around a deep excavation, posing a significant risk of falls to personnel and the public. The project is under considerable time pressure to meet a key milestone. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for Balfour Beatty site management? Option A. Immediately halt all work in the vicinity of the excavation until appropriate safety barriers are installed and a full risk assessment is completed. Option B. Proceed with work as planned, documenting the safety concern for a review to be conducted at the end of the shift. Option C. Delegate the decision on whether to halt work to the immediate site supervisor, who will assess the situation based on current workload pressures. Option D. Continue with work in the area, but instruct supervisors to increase vigilance and verbally warn all personnel about the hazard. The correct answer is A. Immediately halt all work in the vicinity of the excavation until appropriate safety barriers are installed and a full risk assessment is completed. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Balfour Beatty, as a large infrastructure group, operates within a highly regulated environment. Ensuring compliance with health and safety legislation is paramount, not only to protect its workforce and the public, but also to maintain its reputation and avoid significant legal and financial penalties. The challenge lies in balancing the urgency of project delivery with the non-negotiable requirement for robust safety protocols. A failure to adequately address safety concerns, even under pressure, can lead to serious incidents, regulatory scrutiny, and damage to stakeholder trust. The correct approach involves prioritizing the immediate cessation of work in the identified unsafe area until a thorough risk assessment and remedial actions are completed. This aligns with the fundamental principles of health and safety legislation, such as the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 1974 in the UK, which places a duty on employers to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health, safety, and welfare at work of all their employees. It also reflects the proactive risk management expected by regulatory bodies like the Health and Safety Executive, HSE. This approach demonstrates a commitment to a strong safety culture, where immediate risks are addressed without compromise, thereby preventing potential harm and ensuring long-term project viability. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with work while initiating a review later fails to uphold the duty of care. This could be seen as a breach of statutory duty under health and safety law, as it knowingly exposes individuals to potential harm. It prioritizes expediency over safety, which is ethically unacceptable and legally precarious. Another incorrect approach, which is to delegate the immediate decision-making to site supervisors without providing clear guidance or authority to halt operations, creates ambiguity and diffuses responsibility. This can lead to inconsistent application of safety standards and a failure to address critical risks promptly, potentially resulting in an accident and subsequent investigation where the senior management's oversight is questioned. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on documenting the issue without immediate action to mitigate the risk ignores the principle of reasonably practicable control measures. The law requires proactive intervention to prevent foreseeable harm, not just record-keeping of potential hazards. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear hierarchy of controls, with immediate cessation of hazardous activities being the primary response to an identified significant risk. This should be followed by a rapid, yet thorough, risk assessment, implementation of corrective actions, and then a controlled recommencement of work only when safety is assured. Professionals must be empowered to make these critical decisions, supported by robust company policies and a culture that values safety above all else.